Hello, and welcome to this session on public opinion on climate change. My name is Jonathan Schult, and I'm an assistant professor here in the Department of Communication at Cornell University. In this session, we'll consider what the American public thinks about climate change, and we'll also briefly consider historical trends in public opinion on this issue, as well as how Americans' attitudes reliably vary across different demographic groups in society. Many researchers and policymakers are interested in what the public thinks about climate change. And much of what we know about this comes from regular scientific polling that's conducted by survey organizations such as Gallup and Pew, as well as polling conducted by academic institutions such as Yale and George Mason University. Overall, recent surveys show that most Americans are worried about global warming. The 64% figure shown here represents the highest level of concern observed in the previous 8 years of polling done by Gallup. Although concern about global warming has risen in recent years, beliefs about global warming nevertheless vary across groups. Take politics as a familiar and well-known example. Although the percentage of Americans who believe that effects of global warming have already begun has increased steadily since the late 1990s, so too has partisan disagreement about this issue. As shown here, Democrats, they're represented by the blue line, and Republicans, represented by the red line, show a sizable gap on this belief, such that Democrats are much more likely to report believing that effects are already happening. According to sociologist Riley Dunlap and his colleagues, a similar pattern of political polarization can be seen for related beliefs, such as the belief that human activities cause global warming, the belief that global warming will pose a serious threat in one's lifetime, and so on. Now, as this graph makes clear, global warming wasn't always such a partisan issue. If you look to the left side of the graph at the area in the late 90s and early 2000s. But in today's political landscape, it is a partisan issue. These public opinion differences can be understood in other ways as well. For example, researchers at Yale and George Mason have used survey data to segment the American public into 6 distinct categories based on their beliefs, attitudes, and motivations to address global warming. Shown here, these are global warming's 6 Americas, made up of those of us who are dismissive, doubtful, and disengaged on the issue, as well as those of us who are cautious, concerned, and finally alarmed about the issue. The dismissive category at the far left, roughly about 10% of the American population, these folks feel strongly that global warming isn't happening and therefore there's no need to address it. The alarmed category at the far right, roughly 17% of the population, these folks feel strongly that global warming is already happening, that human activities are causing it, and that urgent steps are needed to combat it. In addition to these, many other factors have been found to predict public opinion on climate change. For example, surveys often find that compared to men, women are more likely to agree that global warming is happening, and they're more likely to support the government adopting tighter emission standards as a way to address it. Opinions have been also found to vary by race and ethnicity. For example, Hispanics in the US are more likely to agree that human activities are causing global warming, mirroring greater levels of issue concern observed among members of minority groups more generally as compared to whites in the United States. Finally, younger generations of Americans are more likely to agree that global warming is happening, is caused by humans, and they're more likely to support tighter emission standards compared to Americans aged 65 or older. And so to wrap up, given the changing demographics of the United States, these observations remind us that public opinion on climate change is not stable. Instead, it's dynamic. It shifts over time and in response to current politics, as well as national and global events. Understanding public opinion is valuable for a variety of purposes, from anticipating policy proposals to appreciating the likely viewpoints of our conversation partners and our audiences. We hope you found this discussion of public opinion on climate change to be useful. Thanks for joining us.